Hi there and welcome into BTN's Take 10 podcast. My name is Alex Roux of BTN.com, and I'm excited to bring you a fairly unique episode of this podcast as the show rolls full steam ahead toward football season. If you are new to the show or have only listened to a few episodes, just a refresher, what I've tried to do with the show still in its relative infancy here is to bring on Big Ten related, interesting, and compelling guests and kind of get them to give some unique insight, tell some stories, learn more about their backgrounds, and kind of let them carry the show, and I just kind of ask the questions. Sometimes I'll bring in beat reporters to get some real in-depth analysis like I did with last week's Big Ten Media Days episodes, but generally we'll try to go outside that boilerplate analysis that you can find other places and try to be a little bit more specialized. And usually the guests have, like I said, strong ties to the Big Ten. They either were or are a Big Ten athlete, or they're a prominent member of sports media who attended or covered a Big Ten school. But my guest for this episode doesn't really have any strong Big Ten roots, although he is certainly compelling and very talented. It is Brady Quinn, who many of you probably know was one of the faces of college football about 10 years ago as the quarterback in Notre Dame. And he was real popular, had a very good career at Notre Dame, and was a first-round NFL pick. And following a 7-year NFL career where he bounced around mostly as a backup, he's now a college football analyst at Fox, and he'll be calling Big Ten football games this fall as part of the new Big Ten TV deal with Fox. So I sat down with him last week at Big Ten Media Days, and while he is a Golden Domer through and through, his Big Ten ties actually might run deeper than you think. He grew up just outside Columbus, Ohio, and was recruited very heavily by Big Ten schools, namely Ohio State and Michigan, and has a brother-in-law who was a very prominent Buckeye who Ohio State fans probably know of, and we'll get into that a little bit later in our discussion. So I held on to the interview over a week ago until now, so we had an episode to release this week ahead of BTN's bus tour across the entire Big Ten, which actually departed Chicago yesterday if you're listening to this on its release date on Friday. So I am out on the road as you're probably listening to this, and we'll do my best to get at least one podcast guest at as many schools as possible in the next couple weeks. So definitely stay tuned for some special BTN bus tour episodes. And the best way to stay apprised of new episodes on this kind of irregular schedule we'll have leading up to football season is to subscribe to the show. So if you haven't already, please subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, Podbean, etc. And we'll likely have a discussion with each player on hopefully your favorite team in the next couple of weeks from out on the road on the bus tour. But let's get back to the present and to this week's episode. My interview with former Notre Dame quarterback, current Fox analyst Brady Quinn starts right now. I'm very excited to be joined here in Chicago at Big Ten Media Days by former Notre Dame quarterback, 7-year NFL vet, and current Fox college football analyst Brady Quinn. What's up, Brady? Thanks for joining me.
Anytime. Yeah, glad to be here. Excited about Fox getting the Big Ten this year. Been calling college football games for a couple years, but Big 12, Pac-12. So I know we're really excited at Fox, and I'm personally really excited about having the opportunity to call Big Ten games now. Sure.
So this is a Big Ten podcast, and any fans out there, you know, some might be grumbling and saying, what's this Notre Dame guy doing on the podcast? He's a Golden Domer. Get him out of here. But
doesn't Notre Dame seem like it fits?
You know, it's
the Big Ten?
It's in the footprint. You know, it makes all the sense in the world. But it seems like it's a Notre Dame decision to remain independent. So you're an analyst for Fox, who now has this partnership with the Big Ten. And not only that, you have roots in Big Ten country. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. Born and raised, played at Dublin Kaufman High School growing up, so very familiar obviously with the Big Ten. Grew up going to Ohio State games when I was young. I guess quasi rooted for the Buckeyes, and then really grew to respect the style of play and the type of football that was being played in the Big Ten. So again, all the more reason why I think there's so much excitement about having the opportunity to call Big Ten games.
Sure, like you said, we'll get into your background a little bit more growing up in around Columbus. But walking around here, people know you as the Notre Dame quarterback. So if you walk around an event like this where Big Ten fans are, they'll be at the luncheon later today. How do you win them over? Do you get any crap from them about going to Notre Dame, or
You can't worry about that. It's no different than me calling, I think, 5 USC games last year.
Oh man, yeah.
So think about that. I mean, that was a pretty storied rivalry. Same thing with Stanford or UCLA or any of the other teams that you play in some of these other conferences. I think that actually one advantage that I have is the fact that Notre Dame has played such a national schedule for so long that you don't mind if people love you or hate you. That's actually what you want when you're on TV.
Right.
You just don't want them to be indifferent. So as long as they feel one way or another, you're polarizing and you stand out, that's one of the things that they actually look for. So I'm not opposed to it at all. And I hopefully don't feel like I have to win over fans. I just hope I do a good job. And whether they like me or not based on my affiliation with Notre Dame, I just hope they say, you know what, he added some entertainment to that, or he taught me something and I didn't know when I watched that game.
You can always just give him a smile, charm him and win him over. So.
We got to get on camera more, man.
Right,
I'm not in studio. I'm on a game. You get on camera like twice a game.
I know. So, like you said, you were born in Columbus, grew up just outside in Dublin. Obviously didn't go to a Big Ten school, but you were recruited by Big Ten schools. You were one of the top quarterback recruits in the country at the time. Which Big Ten schools were recruiting you the hardest at that time?
Yeah, well, all of them were recruiting me pretty hard.
Yeah.
There was only a few schools in the country that weren't recruiting me at the time, and that was, Florida, Miami, USC, and Texas was kind of quiet, but pretty much everywhere else I was being recruited by.
So which were you considering?
The final three that when it really came down to it was Notre Dame, Michigan, and Ohio State. And I just felt like the combination for academics and athletics, to me, with all three schools, kind of fit the bill of what I was looking forward to doing. I wanted to play football at the highest level. I wanted to play in a system that I felt like gave me the best opportunity to play at the next level. And I wanted to be able to have the education, the experience as a student where I felt like if football didn't work out, I'd have the opportunity to go follow or pursue another career, whether that was in law or finance or something else.
So what's it like growing up in a community like that's obviously very football focused and obsessed? Was there any outside pressure to go to Ohio State and stay home?
Yeah, I mean there was. I think everyone would have been excited about me being 20 minutes away from where I grew up and being able to go play in the shoe and be able to kind of follow in those footsteps of other players in Central Ohio that had done the same. So many of the other players I'd either played against or knew from the recruiting trails. So there was definitely some pressure. And to be honest with you, I had committed to Notre Dame before my senior year, and Ohio State ended up winning the national championship that year, and they kind of continued to keep recruiting me.
Yeah.
Even though I'd already verbally committed, and I told the staff at that point that I wasn't going to change my mind, but they still gave it all, their best effort. Luke Fickell was at the time, responsible for me. Jim Tressel was the head coach, and I loved them to death. To be honest with you, if I would have went to Ohio State, I think it would have ended up being for the wrong reasons. It would have been because I wanted to play for Coach Tressel and Coach Fickell as opposed to wanting to go play for the academic side of things or free from the offense they ran at that point in time, which wasn't very conducive for quarterback play.
Sure. So do you think, having grown up in that area, with the disappointment maybe have been worse if you would have gone Michigan over Notre Dame?
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
I mean, when people had heard that I was kind of leading towards Michigan, because there was a certain point in my recruitment where it was really down to kind of Tennessee, Michigan, Ohio State. I was too much of a wuss to be able to go out any further west. I'd taken a visit to Colorado, and I had family out there at the time. So when I went there, I loved it. It's beautiful. It's scenic. Boulder's incredible. But I came to the realization that I wanted my parents to be able to watch. We didn't have the money, so they weren't going to be able to travel and go out and see me play. So that was one of the reasons why I kind of wanted to stay in that region. And it really was down to Ohio State and Michigan. And I almost, committed to Michigan. And it was really tough for me to try to be patient with the process just because I thought I was making the right decision, but I hadn't heard enough from Notre Dame and Tyron Willingham. And once he got there, once I got up there and met with him and talked with the staff, it just kind of changed my mind of ultimately I think where I wanted to go. Yeah,
you mentioned the academic, the athletic combination is a big factor for you. Go a little deeper into that. When you visited Notre Dame, what was the biggest impact that their recruiting had on you? Why did you decide to go just outside of the basic academic and athletic influences?
I mean, like the bottom line was all three schools I think kind of fit that bill as being higher academic institution schools. Michigan fit more I think what I was wanting to do. They had a pre-law program and they had a course a curriculum structure to I think get me where I wanted to go if football didn't work out. Whereas Notre Dame was a bit more general. But when I'd gone to Notre Dame's campus, after I talked to Coach Willingham, it wasn't even so much anything the university did. I think it just kind of sold itself.
Sure.
And I think walking on campus, I got more of a sense of this is where I could see myself being for the next 4 years, kind of growing and maturing as a young man and playing football and going to school.
Sure. And, I mean, no one can find fault in that decision. You set all kinds of records at Notre Dame, had a fabulous career there, started for 4 years. Give the fans some insight. What's that like, being the man at one of the most prestigious football programs in the country and being on the biggest stage?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound too much like a homer in saying this, but it's not one of the biggest. I mean, it's the biggest. There's nowhere else where you can go and be nationally recognized.
NBC every weekend,
NBC is part of that. When you're not on NBC, you're on ABC or ESPN or
sure.
Fox now, who has those games. It's just the following that Notre Dame has nationally. I mean, people would recognize me internationally once I got graduated from Notre Dame, got on the NFL. People didn't say, hey, it's the Cleveland Browns quarterback. They would notice you as Notre Dame quarterback.
Sure.
It's one of those places that's so unique in its following and its history and its tradition that it's really hard to understand it unless you go there, unless you've been a part of it to some degree.
I mean, I can vouch for that. I grew up pretty much watching you and Texas and USC, and those were like the big programs, at the time. Matt Leinart, Vince Young, and yourself. That was when I really first started following football, and that's pretty much when I think back to that era of college football. It's you and a couple other guys and Reggie Bush, and that's about it. So
and it was fun, like we had a cool little band, me, Jeff Samardzija, Tom Zbikowski, who was a Chicago kid,
sure.
And it was just a different time the way things were. Social media hadn't really hit quite yet, so I think we were able to enjoy ourselves probably a little bit more than maybe some other students
right.
Can nowadays, and still enjoy into having success in football, but also having fun and being a kid.
Yep. And once you moved on from Notre Dame, you eventually were drafted by the Cleveland Browns, and you were taken later than expected in the NFL draft with the 22nd pick. A lot of people projected you'd go top 10 or even sooner. So what's that like for someone who has been on such a big stage his whole career, pretty much, been highly ranked, and then having to sit and sweat that out in New York City in the green room? How's that get in your head?
It doesn't. I mean, you wait 4 hours? So look, it's a joke, man. I mean, you get drafted to go play in the NFL. You wait a lot longer your entire life, and you work so hard to get to that point. Being 22nd pick versus a top 10 pick, it's not really that big of a difference when you look at the grand scheme of things. And the fact that it was to the Cleveland Browns, a team that I grew up rooting for, going to games, had hoped I was going to have the opportunity to play for, and kind of after they passed on me at number 3 and took Joe Thomas, and at that point in time, I kind of thought, okay, now they're on that list of teams that you want to kind of go prove them wrong. And so they were able to trade up and get me, which even that in itself was crazy, how that 10 minutes in that draft pick where I was talking to Baltimore because they were going to take me in the 23rd pick in a trade with Kansas City, and then in the last minute Cleveland called in with 50 seconds left in that pick to trade with Dallas to take me at 22. So that in itself was kind of a whirlwind of emotions.
And I think it's magnified too by the broadcast, and they make it seem like a bigger deal than it is sometimes. If they have the camera focused on you or someone that's in your position. And you're right, like they make it seem like, it's such a big deal that you're dropping in the draft, but like you said, it works out. You go to play for the hometown team, and you're a first round pick, and it's like what's really
people blow it out of proportion, I think, because like people would always say, oh, you lost this many millions, and you're like, how could I have lost anything?
Sure.
I walked into that room with probably $10 in my pocket. I walked out with $10 in my pocket.
Sure.
You didn't make or lose anything in that period of time. I mean, as an athlete too, it's like I didn't even play a game. What performance could I have done in that 24-hour period to make me lose or win money? So that part of it, I think it's overblown only because it's TV. You got to do something. You got to have some sort of storyline, and they've changed it a lot since then. As far as having it on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday format as opposed to just 2 days before.
Sure. And I guess what's your advice then for kids today who, I mean, not that they would, like we had a player at Iowa this year, Desmond King. He's the first one that popped in my mind. We had a crew out in Iowa City for him. We thought he was maybe going to go on the first night. He didn't go until the third day.
Yeah.
So what's your advice to players to, handle that mentally that might drop in the draft?
It's a starting point. That's all it is. You just hope that you get drafted into the best situation and circumstance because, a lot of guys, if you're talking about from the money aspect of it, you really make the real money in the second contract, not the first money, not your first contract. So you'd like to be drafted to a team that has good continuity as far as ownership and coaching staff and general manager and all that gives you the best chance to continue to grow as a player, because it is just that. It's a starting point, and you can't get too caught up in everything else out around you with the money aspect of things, when it should be about, playing, performing, and hopefully, again, you're in a system where you don't have to change coaches and change scheme constantly, because that's, difficult in itself.
So playing in Cleveland did you feel any added pressure playing for what you could call a hometown team? Was it magnified at all?
No, because, no one's going to put any more pressure on me than I was going to put on myself. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't as if I had a bad performance or going into training camp, that anyone was going to sit there and make me feel nervous. If I was nervous, it was because I was excited about the opportunity, and I understood, what I was, meant to be, or they were hoping for me to be. But that was all because of what I wanted to be to Cleveland. So I think it was just tough, being that you get drafted there. It feels like it's a storybook, beginning to a career. And I got a coaching, change after 2 years. I ended up ending my second season on IR when I broke my index finger on my throwing hand and had to get pins put in. And you get a new head coach, new general manager, and they have no ties to you.
Right.
And you're under contract though, and it wasn't a great relationship. And that's one of the first relationships I've ever had with a head coach that really didn't get along with, and you can see why a lot of teams don't work, because the coaches and players, when they don't get along and things don't work, they're never going to be able to go then put on a performance on Sundays and go win football games, at least not on a consistent basis.
So big picture, stepping back, how do you evaluate your NFL career as a whole?
To me, I think it lasted double whatever the career average is for a lot of players.
Right.
Career average is 3 years. Would have loved to do things very, very different. Would have loved to have started my career in Cleveland and ended it there, and be able to win some football games, go to the playoffs and all that. But in the grand scheme of things, it ended a lot shorter than I would have liked it to. I actually ended up going into my eighth season with the Miami Dolphins in training camp after I had back surgery in my 7th year, and just couldn't get the strength and feeling back in my right leg like I had before the surgery and before I messed up my back. So I think that was more disappointing. It seemed like any time I had a little bit of momentum, I had a Liz Frank injury my 3rd year in Cleveland, had my index finger my 2nd year in my 2nd start on Monday Night Football. I had a back injury the first chance I get when I go to the St. Louis Rams, and Sam Bradford gets hurt and they bring me in to try to play there. So for a guy, I played in every single college football game and made it through relatively healthy, to then go in the NFL and just seem to have no luck being able to get any sort of momentum. It was tough. I think the hardest thing is I just feel like I would have loved to have an opportunity to be in a system for more than 1 year, maybe 2 years.
Right.
I mean, Cleveland, I got drafted, we had the same OC for the first 2 years, and I felt like I was the first 2 years in the league, and I felt like I was at a great point with that offense and system. I never had a situation where I was ever in one system for 2 years ever again.
Right.
And I think that's hard for a player to go through. It's hard to have. I get traded to Denver. Josh McDaniels is the guy who traded for me. He's there for 12 games. He gets fired after the first 12 games.
Yeah.
So, again, I'm having to go through a new offense and a new head coach and John Fox the following year. So it was like there was just constant change and turnover, and it got to the point where it affects your ability to be able to anticipate, to be able to feel confident in what you're doing out there, the players you're playing with. And that's all part of it. I mean, those are the small parts of having success that people don't realize. And imagine constantly changing your manager and your job,
Sure.
or all of a sudden you're the Big Ten podcast this week, you're Pac-12 next week, Big 12 the next week, and you got people telling you to do different things. It makes it hard for you to be really good at your job.
Sure. So shifting gears a little bit into your current role as a sports broadcaster, lots of athletes I talk to, they'll say, I was in broadcast journalism major, and I knew I wanted to do this. Did you ever think about this career in school?
No.
When did you? So if you didn't think about it in school, when did this become a possibility for you?
I was laid up on my back. I had, I had spinal fluid leaks. It's when they go to puncture your back. You get epidurals, but I had to have a contrast dye put in to see which one of the discs was affecting my nerve function in my right leg. And I was kind of laid up thinking to myself, like, this could be it. I mean, I couldn't wiggle my toes. I dropped foot. And I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to feel, my leg again, or if it's going to atrophy or what's going to happen. So I started to kind of just as I was later recruiting, thinking about things, and Jeff Fisher had mentioned to me about maybe looking at TV as I was recovering from the back injury, that it might be something I could be good at. So thought about it, called my agent, they set up some things, and to be honest, right after I'd done some hits on different networks, they started offering me jobs. And it got down to the point where there was so much interest that I kind of had to almost make a decision of, all right, my body isn't recuperating and healing the way I thought it was going to be. Maybe I need to sign a contract with a TV network and explore this, where I could be kind of ascending and rising, as opposed to just trying to fight to hang on and not feeling like I could play like I used to before my back injury. So signed a deal with Fox, ended up breaching contract when the Dolphins gave me an opportunity to come to training camp. Wasn't a good opportunity. And I think the second day I was there, I called Fox back and said, hey, they're going to release me at some point at the end of cuts. And they did, and I jumped right back into the booth. And I started that next week with Minnesota at TCU.
So what was your backup plan if broadcasting didn't pan out?
Well, I mean, as far as broadcasting goes, I never really looked at it that way. I mean, I've obviously, made enough where I feel comfortable financially to do a bunch of different things. Contemplated going back to school, potentially getting my JD MBA or just getting my law degree. But I've also kind of delved into the private equity world a little bit in finance. So I've done some things outside of that. So that's always something that's kind of always evolving, because to be honest, it's hard to have, I do radio, I do other stuff, but it's hard to really hang your hat on this career because it's so fluid and changing. And you look at a guy like Phil Simms, who was doing a great job for CBS.
Top games every week, and then
he gets ousted by Tony Romo, a guy who's won one playoff game. And if you're based on his professional football experience, and then you can't base it on merit for his broadcasting job because Romo's never broadcast before. So you see decisions like that, and it makes you think to yourself, you better have a backup plan.
Right. We got into it with Joel Klatt a little bit, talking about working your way up through the ranks versus just getting dropped in.
And he's done a tremendous job of that. I mean, Joel's one of the hardest workers. He's taught me a lot at Fox. He was one of the first guys to really take me under his wing, and kind of help me understand how to prepare, how he sees a game and all of that. So he's tremendous at that. And I think his career, the way everything's kind of gone, is very indicative of a guy who's kind of worked his way to get to the top.
Sure. So you've called both college and NFL games. What are the differences and the challenges going back and forth between those two? I mean, they're not different sports, obviously, but it is a different game.
It's definitely a different game, and it's so hard calling college football compared to the NFL.
Right.
The game is so fast, and one of the biggest things you can't do, or you'd like to not do, is step on the play-by-play. So as a color analyst, you've got to say something that is meaningful, that either entertains, educates, or informs people. And you've got a small window to do it in college football. And you've got duplicate numbers, and you've got huge rosters, and there's not as much information.
No names on the back of the jersey sometimes,
And then it's hard to see what numbers based on the jersey. So it's an entirely different ball game to get a feel for. You got teams where you don't have any access, right? Jim Harbaugh doesn't put out a 2D. So it challenged you, I think, in your film study. It challenged you to try to find everything you can, really be able to play on your toes, as compared to the NFL, where there's a lot more regulations that you have to abide by. So it helps out the broadcast team and smaller rosters, and the guys. So it's incredibly hard, but it's also a ton of fun.
Sure.
College football, there's nothing like the energy you feel in those venues and those stadiums with the fans.
So one of your coworkers at Fox is Matt Leinart. And like I mentioned earlier, he was another iconic quarterback in the mid-2000s. What's your relationship like with Matt? And do you ever get into the infamous Bush push game from your career when Notre Dame played USC?
Look, they cheated. They know it. He knows it. I've always told him, though, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. So I would have hoped my running back would have done the same thing for me if I couldn't have got in on a quarterback sneak. But given my track record of quarterback sneaks, I think I probably would have been more successful than that. I mean, he's one of those West Coast guys, so he puts a lot of
call him soft,
a lot of gel in his hair. It's actually probably more like pomade, and he doesn't really work out much. He does like yoga, so that might have been one reason why I think he needed the Bush push to actually get him in the end zone.
All right, maybe we'll get him on the podcast and I'll ask him about it. We'll see what he says. I want to get into a little more Buckeyes talk. Your brother-in-law is A.J. Hawk, former Buckeyes linebacker, played in the NFL for a long time, and one of the stories that Buckeyes fans, I'm sure, remember is your sister wearing a split Notre Dame, Ohio State jersey when you guys played. What's the story behind that, and how tired are you by now of being asked about it?
I mean, it's not that bad. it's funny. I mean, she got more TV time that year than I think either AJ or I did. But obviously, it actually came about. I think Nelly was like one of the first people to have like a split jersey,
do the half and half,
the wrapper, and that's where I think my sister got the idea.
He did it at the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah. And I think she had gotten the idea to do it and found someone to do it. So that's kind of how it came about. And, you know, because of her relationship with both and all that, which we tried to keep under wraps, but as the week went on, like, people kind of started to catch on. So it ended up being, you know, something that everyone wanted to talk about and all that, and that split jersey thing kind of, she's like the first person I actually think about. Probably a lot of people think about probably before Nelly, just because she was on TV so much that day.
And AJ, I think, is here at Big Ten Media Days, right?
Yeah.
You get nervous that he's going to sack you walking down the hall here?
No, he's lost so much weight now, and he's into like just doing yoga and other things. No, not at all.
You said you bigger than him now? You can put up more?
Yeah, he'd tell you that. No, I don't know. He still works out pretty hard, actually. Yeah, we both work for SiriusXM. Both we do NFL, and then he's been doing some more college radio as well. So we'll definitely run into each other. I'm hoping to kind of jump on with them here in a little bit. But it's always a fun conversation because we know each other well enough where there's probably some inside jokes being played, you know, along
right.
when we're talking. But hopefully we'll keep it clean. Sometimes it ventures into bad territory.
He's got his own podcast going on, doesn't he, right now?
He does. The Hotcast is awesome. He's got some tremendous guests on, and I'm sure every year he goes out to the Lake Tahoe tournament to play golf and that, and usually recruits a pretty solid list of guests he has on. So
before I let you go, Brady, I want to get into a foundation that you've been involved in for quite some time now. You come from a military family, correct? Yeah. It was your father? Yeah, my grandfather actually served in WW2 first. Okay. My father served in Vietnam. He was a Marine in Vietnam. So my dad and I decided to start a foundation when I was in Denver. And it was about, I want to say 2010. And I was out at training camp, and I've always had a strong appreciation for our armed forces and the men and women who sacrifice to allow us to do the things that we do, be it, you know, college football or NFL, you know, color analyst or broadcaster. So I met a couple individuals who were they had faced catastrophic injuries from their time serving in Iraq and right.
Afghanistan, and they had become handicapped, ridden or wheelchair ridden, and they were waiting for some funding from the VA. The VA was struggling to be able to help them out. It was a long process. So, you know, I kind of said to my dad, I wish there's something we can do, and we just thought, all right, maybe let's just help one person, and we'll try to help as many people as we can. So my dad builds homes in Central Ohio. Given my connections, I was able to kind of start to find veterans who are in need, who needed, you know, handicap accessible kitchens, bathrooms, ramps in and out of their home, and that's what we started. We called it, you know, Third and Goal, and we do business as Veterans Home Aid. So we do a lot of home remodels and those sorts of things. We do a bunch of other things. Partner with the University of Notre Dame to work on a project called the Warrior Scholar Project. We partner with them to basically put together a curriculum that helps the veterans who are returning back from their service reacclimate into civilian life and help better prepare them for undergraduate, continuing their education, you know, maybe, you know, a graduate degree, whatever that may be, so they can, you know, slide back into civilian life and not have to have the pitfalls of, you know, facing monetary issues, you know, not having enough money and
right.
blowing some of the money they come back with, or, you know, facing homelessness. So we've partnered together with them on a 4-year project we're working on, and we're trying to grow that and expand that as well. So it's grown, and we're very, very proud of it. We don't have an office. We don't pay anyone. We've streamlined everything. So really a large percentage of the portion of donations all go towards the veterans we're helping, you know, besides whatever it costs us to, you know, help put on a fundraiser. Sure,
that's awesome. And it lines up nicely because you're calling the Ohio State Army game coming up, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't know that we'll actually be able to, you know, broadcast anything because I think we have a Major League Baseball playoff game on before that. But
right.
We're doing an event, hopefully before the game. We're partnering with the USO of Central Ohio and Southern Ohio to have some sort of tailgate for the vets. You know, wish we could do more in regards to the history of Ohio State players actually serving in the military. You know, Luke Rosa's you know, one of the first ones that comes to mind. People who went and served over in wars, you know, and then went on to go do amazing things. Groza obviously with the Cleveland Browns. So it's going to be cool, and that's why it's such a neat opportunity to be a part of, you know, doing college football, but this year in particular, being able to have the Big Ten. Yeah,
that'll be a cool experience for sure, and I believe it's September 16th on Fox. Yes. So everyone get ready for that game coming up. couple more questions before I let you go. Do you have a solid idea of how many Big Ten and NFL games you'll call this year, what the split is like?
Yeah, I mean, I'll call a full slate of college football, and then at the end of the year, I'll usually get 2 NFL games. I think is what it permits, because we've got a Big Ten, Big 12 championship. We'll be getting one of those games,
yep.
And then I believe we have 2 bowl games now too. Fox has been able to pick up the Foster Farms as well as I think the Holiday Bowl. So I'm not sure if we'll be involved in one of those 2 or not, which takes us into December. So at that point in time, you only have so many NFL games left. So, usually I'll do a Week 17 game and then 16, 15, depending on the schedule and depending on, how the flex scheduling works.
All right, last question. I'm going to put you on the spot. Obviously, all the college games aren't set yet as far as the Big Ten goes and which games Fox will get. But what is one Big Ten campus you'd like to go to this year if you had the choice?
Oh, Madison, Wisconsin.
Yeah?
Yeah, never went there. Was recruited by Wisconsin. Obviously, I bunked up with Joe Thomas our first year we were together in training camp throughout the season for the Browns. He was a Wisconsin grad, and he raved about it. He loved Madison. Yeah. And I've never heard of a player who went to Wisconsin and was in Madison that didn't love it. So I can't wait to try to go see that campus. There's a bunch of others. It's not just that, but that's one that I'm not familiar with that I've heard only great things about, so I can't wait.
Madison's a really fun time. They got the lakes, they got the Capitol building, and the campus is just beautiful. So I can't argue with that.
I was recruited to a bunch of different schools. Mm-hmm. I've seen, obviously Columbus and Ann Arbor and East Lansing and West Lafayette and you kind of go on. I've seen all those campuses. That's the one that's kind of intriguing to me. Yep. I've even seen Minnesota's. So it'll be cool to be able to check that out.
All right, so Wisconsin fans, show Brady Quinn a good time. Start lining up suggestions for restaurants and bars and all that. All right, Brady, that's all I got for you. Thanks so much for joining me, and looking forward to seeing your coverage this year on Fox.
Looking forward to it as well.
All right, man. Appreciate
Thanks
it.
so much.
Thanks again to Brady for joining me. And I really have to give a shout out to all the Fox talent that I spoke with in the last couple weeks, including Joel Klatt and Jenny Taft, who I had on last week's episode. All 3 of them couldn't have been nicer and more accommodating, and I'm for sure looking forward to seeing them call Big Ten games and working more with them going forward in the future with this Big Ten and Fox partnership. Also, thanks to everyone out there for listening. Please rate and comment on your online listening app if you like the show, and thanks as always to Wes White for producing. We will talk to you next time on the Take 10 podcast.